Open your Bible to Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 8. In most modern translations, you will read this: When the Most High divided the nations, he set their boundaries according to the number of the sons of Israel. That is the version most people have read their entire lives. Now look at the same verse in the Dead Sea Scrolls, manuscripts 1,000 years older than the text your Bible was translated from. The same verse reads, When the Most High divided the nations, he set their boundaries according to the number of the sons of God. Sons of Israel, sons of God. One word changed. But that single word changes everything about who the God of the Bible actually is, and where he sits in the divine order. Welcome to Unburied Remnants. The truth was never lost. It was buried. Let's dig in. If you grew up in any branch of Christianity or Judaism, you were taught something close to this. From the very beginning, there was one God. That God called Abraham. That God led Israel out of Egypt. That God gave the law to Moses. Monotheism wasn't something Israel evolved into. It is what Israel always was. That is the received story. Clean, simple, consistent. There is just one problem. It is not what the texts actually say. For the last century, biblical scholars, not conspiracy theorists, not internet researchers, but archaeologists, linguists, and Old Testament scholars at accredited universities have been building a case that the God of the earliest Hebrew texts and the God of later Hebrew theology are not the same figure. That Israel's religion began not with one God, but with many, and that the path to strict monotheism was a long, deliberate, and heavily edited journey that left traces throughout the text that were never fully erased. Two scholars in particular have done the most serious work on this. Mark Smith, professor at Princeton, whose book The Origins of Biblical Monotheism is considered foundational in the field, and Michael Heiser, an evangelical Christian scholar with a PhD in Hebrew and Semitic studies, who spent his career arguing that the divine council structure is not paganism smuggled into the Bible. It is the Bible's own theology, hiding in plain sight. To understand what the earliest Hebrew texts are actually doing, you need to meet El. El is the father of the gods in the ancient Canaanite and Ugaritic religious world that predates and surrounds early Israel. He is the aged patriarch, white-bearded, seated on a mountain throne, surrounded by his divine family, presiding over a council of gods. He's described as compassionate, slow to anger, the creator of creatures. Sound familiar? El is the word the earliest texts use for God. El Shaddai, God of the mountain. El Elyon, God Most High. El Olam, God Everlasting. These are not titles of Yahweh. In the oldest layers of Genesis, they appear as distinct designations, names used before the name Yahweh appears in the narrative at all. In Genesis 14, the priest Melchizedek blesses Abraham in the name of El Elyon, God Most High. Abraham accepts this blessing without question, as if this is already his God. No introduction, no explanation. El Elyon is a known figure. The name El does not need to be introduced to Abraham, because Abraham already knows him. Picture the scene. A wandering patriarch, a mysterious priest, of no tribe, of no lineage, the text will explain, meets him after battle and blesses him in the name of El Elyon. And the patriarch of what will become monotheism bows his head and accepts the blessing without a single question asked. This is not the behavior of a man being introduced to a new god. And then there is Asherah. In the Ugaritic texts, Asherah is El's consort, the mother goddess, the queen of heaven. And here is where archaeology walks in and refuses to leave. At a site called Kuntalet Arud in the Sinai Desert, archaeologists discovered large storage jars from the 9th century BC, inside Israel's own territory. The jars were inscribed. The inscription reads, Yahweh and his asherah, a consort, a feminine counterpart. Not in Canaan, not from a neighboring people Israel is being warned against. From inside Israel. In the 9th century BC, someone in Israel believed Yahweh had a wife, and that wife was borrowed directly from El. Now meet Yahweh. Yahweh is not from Canaan. This is one of the most striking findings in modern biblical scholarship, and one of the least discussed. The oldest biblical poetry, the Song of Deborah in Judges 5, the Blessing of Moses in Deuteronomy 33, consistently locates Yahweh's origin in the south. Seir, Edom, Midian, the Sinai, not in Canaan at all. This is called the Canaanite hypothesis. It proposes that Yahweh was originally a deity of the Midianite or Canaanite peoples of the southern desert. And Moses encounters him not in Israel, but while living with his Midianite father-in-law Jethro, a foreign priest, on foreign soil. The first sustained contact between Israel and Yahweh happens through a Midianite priest in Midianite territory. That is what the text says. The burning bush is the first moment in the narrative when the name Yahweh is formally revealed to a human being. Moses asks, "When the people ask me the name of the God who sent me, what do I tell them?" And the answer is the divine name, Yahweh. I am who I am. The text is treating this as a disclosure, a new name, a name not previously known. And it is being disclosed not in Israel, not at a tribal shrine, but in the wilderness, to a man living among Midianites, beside a mountain that will go on to become the mountain of God. Yahweh's personality is strikingly different from El's. Where El is ancient, seated, compassionate, Yahweh is a warrior, a storm god, a god of armies. The title Lord of Hosts in Hebrew is Yahweh Sabaoth, literally Yahweh of the armies. He descends on mountains in fire, smoke, and earthquake. He parts seas. He rains down plagues. And he is jealous. This is the word the text itself uses, repeatedly. You shall have no other gods before me, for I, Yahweh your God, am a jealous God. A God who describes himself as jealous is not behaving like the only God in existence. You are only jealous when there are rivals, and rivals require a context, a structure, a council in which you are one voice among many. And then there is Exodus 6 verse 3, one of the most quietly devastating verses in the entire Old Testament. God speaks to Moses and says this, I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as El Shaddai. But by my name Yahweh, I was not known to them. Read that slowly. The patriarchs knew El Shaddai. They did not know Yahweh. These are the same person now, in the text as it stands. But the text is telling you directly that at some earlier point, they were not. This is not a theologian's interpretation. This is not a fringe reading. This is the verse itself, in Hebrew, drawing a line between two names, two periods, and two relationships. 4 texts. This is where the case stops being theoretical and becomes textual. 4 passages that mainstream scholarship agrees represent the strongest surviving evidence of what Israelite religion looked like before the editors arrived. Deuteronomy 32, verses 8 and 9, the Dead Sea Scrolls version. When the Most High, El Elyon, divided the nations, he set their boundaries according to the number of the sons of God. And Yahweh's portion, his share, his inheritance, was Israel. Read that slowly. El Elyon divides the nations. Yahweh receives one of them as his portion. El is above, Yahweh is below. The Most High and Yahweh are 2 different figures in this text. And someone, at some point between the composition of this text and the Masoretic manuscripts your modern Bible is based on, changed sons of God to sons of Israel. One word, erasing the hierarchy in a single editorial stroke. We know it was changed because the Dead Sea Scrolls, hidden in caves for 2,000 years before any editor could reach them, preserved the original. God, Elohim, stands in the divine council of El. He judges the other gods. He accuses them. You have defended the wicked. You have shown partiality to the evil. And then comes the verdict. I said, you are gods, sons of the Most High, all of you. But you will die like men. You will fall like any prince. This passage is not a metaphor. The gods being addressed are real divine beings in the Hebrew text, sons of El, who have been given authority over the nations and have abused it. They are being stripped of their divine status as punishment. This is not monotheism. This is the transition to monotheism, being recorded as it happens in the Psalms themselves. Psalm 29, the great hymn to Yahweh the storm god. In 1929, archaeologists excavating the ancient city of Ugarit in modern Syria discovered a cache of clay tablets, the religious texts of the Canaanite world that predates Israel. Among them was a hymn to Baal, the Canaanite storm god, that is nearly identical to Psalm 29. The structure, the imagery, the divine epithets. The same poem, sung to Baal, and then reassigned to Yahweh. This does not mean Israel fabricated its religion. It means Israel participated in a shared religious world, and that Yahweh absorbed the characteristics, the hymns, and the identity of the storm deities around him as his own identity crystallized. And the Kuntilat Ajrud jars again, because they cannot be argued away. These are not texts, these are physical artifacts, ceramic storage vessels found in Israeli territory, inscribed by an Israelite hand in the 9th century BC that read, Yahweh and his asherah, a consort, borrowed from El. Inside Israel, you cannot unfind this.
So how does a religion that begins with El, encounters Yahweh as a separate storm deity from the south, and worships Asherah alongside both of them, how does it become strict monotheism? 621 BC, King Josiah of Judah. His priests discover a lost book of the law during temple renovations. It arrives at exactly the right moment to provide divine authority for a sweeping religious program. Scholars overwhelmingly identify this book as an early version of Deuteronomy, and many of those scholars, writing in peer-reviewed journals, not on the internet, suspect the book was not found, but written, specifically composed to authorize what Josiah had already decided to do. The high places are torn down, the Asherah poles are burned. All worship is centralized in Jerusalem. Every other shrine in the land is defiled. This is the Deuteronomistic reform, and it is the hinge point at which the editing of Israel's religious past begins in earnest. Then comes the Babylonian exile. 586 BC. Jerusalem falls. The temple is destroyed. The ark disappears from history. Israel's theological crisis becomes existential. Surrounded by Babylonian religion in a foreign land, with their God apparently defeated by foreign gods, the question is not academic, it is survival. And from that crucible emerges something new, harder, stricter, more insistent. There is one God. There have always been one God. There will only ever be one God. The editing that follows is systematic. Divine council language muted. Sons of God passages smoothed over. Asherah references stripped from the temple record. The singular supreme God, who was always there, retroactively placed at the beginning of everything. But here is what the editors could not account for. Texts copied before the reform. Poems written before the exile. Ancient source documents woven into the later text because they were too authoritative to remove, only to be quietly altered. And the manuscripts hidden in clay jars in the caves above the Dead Sea, sealed for 2,000 years, that preserved what the editorial process was trying to bury. The Dead Sea Scrolls did not reveal new information. They revealed old information. What the text said before someone decided it should say something different. Let me bring this together before we close. The God of the Hebrew Bible, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, is presented in the final form of the text as supreme and singular. One God, no rivals, no equals. But beneath that final text, in its poetry, its oldest fragments, its legal codes, and now in the manuscripts the caves preserved, a different picture emerges. El, a father deity, ancient, enthroned, the head of a divine council. His name's scattered through Genesis before Yahweh's name has been spoken once. Yahweh, a warrior, a storm god, a deity from the southern desert, introduced to Israel through a Midianite priest. Jealous, by his own description, in a world that still has other gods worth being jealous of. Asherah, his consort, on a jar, inside Israel, in the 9th century. and Deuteronomy 32:8-9 in the Dead Sea Scrolls. El dividing the nations, Yahweh receiving Israel as his portion. A hierarchy that one word, changed at some point between the scroll and your Bible, very nearly erased. This is not fringe scholarship. This is the conclusion of Princeton professors and evangelical PhDs who spent their careers reading these texts in their original languages. The question it leaves open is the most interesting question of all. If Israel's path to monotheism was a process, a long, edited, politically shaped process, then what exactly was at the beginning of that path? What was the original theology that the reform was reforming? That question does not have a clean answer. But the evidence that the question is real, that evidence is now beyond serious dispute. Next episode, Göbekli Tepe, a structure built 11,600 years ago, before writing, before the wheel, before agriculture, or at least before what we thought was the beginning of agriculture. A site so ancient, it doesn't just push back the timeline of human civilization, it breaks it entirely. And it was deliberately buried. Something built it. Something decided to hide it. And for 11 millennia, it waited. Thanks for watching Unburied Remnants. If you like this content, please like, share, and subscribe to help support the channel. Stay curious, keep digging.